When you talk about a series that you love, it's kind of hard to talk about, not necessarily just the good, but maybe some of the bad things about it. Well, I think as a great little Wolfman once said, shit escalates. Hello, howlers and bookworms. Mike back again today to talk a little Red Rising, guys. It's been a minute. We've kind of gone radio silent on Red Rising for a while now, and I've been missing this universe, and I kind of wanted to talk about it because I still feel like there aren't enough of you guys reading it. Now, this series was first released in 2014 with book number 1, Red Rising. The most current book is 2019's Dark Age, with the 6th and presumably final book on the way. Hopefully. It feels like it's been forever, right? So what is the good and the bad? It's more than just a really awesome Clint Eastwood movie, right? I think what I've talked about with this is the good and the bad is where I take series that people say, oh, those are series that you just like, you love, you can never find anything bad to say about them. I really kind of took that as a challenge. I talked about Lycanius. I talked about Wheel of Time. I talked about First Law. Those are 3 series I adore, right? So it was easy for me to go in there and look at them and be like, hey, these are some things I like. These are some things you may not like. And the whole reason of doing this, guys, is where I try to convince people that are on the fence one way or the other, okay, here's the things that I think that might work for you. Here's the things that might not. So it really is going to depend on you, really, how this goes. I don't necessarily have anything bad with these series, but you know what? This is a series that I love, warts and all. We're going to talk about it, the good and the maybe not so good here. So the whole point, like I said, is to convince you guys to read. If that why you should read that I did for this series a couple years back wasn't enough for you, maybe this will get a little more into the fine detail about what you may or may not like. So let's kick things off like I usually like to do, guys. And I like to talk about the good first. Now, with this series, I think the dialogue is extremely quotable. There's so many great one-liners. When I did that Why You Should Read on it, it was hard for me to narrow down what lines I wanted to use for that introduction that I made for it because there are just so many great ones. It seems like if you're reading this like on a Kindle or if you're the masochist that likes to actually highlight their books, you'll find yourself highlighting something every few pages because there's some really, really great dialogue for all these characters. And Darrow especially. Darrow has some speeches in these books that will make you want to run through a wall and fight a war for the guy. It's just that good. So, and then you got Severo has some of the best one-liners that I've heard in modern sci-fi. So again, a lot of the quotes are great, but it really is just the dialogue back and forth. I never have that instance where I feel like this isn't anything that people this age would be saying. I never have that like Dawson's Creek moment where you're like, who said that when they were 18 years old, So, it's really good the way that they communicate with each other. It's believable, and it becomes very endearing, and that's where we get from the characters here. Now, the characters, you think about the arcs for some of these characters from book 1 to book 5, or those who make it to book 5. It's just amazing to think about the journey that some of these characters have been on. And I think he does really fine character work. And he does that thing almost like in a George R.R. Martin way, where it's a character's like, I would never root for that character because they're just scum of the earth, right? And you'll be damn, I can't believe it. He's actually made me give a damn about this character. So he's very good at that. And he's very good at, the ones that you're supposed to hate. He's good at making you love to hate them. And he makes some of them, very hard for you to hate to love them. It does happen. So you deal with some morally great characters like the series has, you're going to have instances like that. You're going to have instances where you're like, are we the baddies? You're kind of feel like that more times than not. So that is, he's really good at showing the friendships, I think, between the characters. The romance is going to be hit or miss with you, obviously, but when it comes to just like the friendships and the camaraderie between characters, it's hard to beat. It's some really good stuff, especially the main bromance of the series, which I'm not going to tell you what that is. But it's one of those that's just really heartfelt. There's some character moments between what I said when I talked about Why You Should Read. Some of my favorite moments in this series are when you have just 2 characters in a room talking to each other. These character moments are so important. They're so vital for making us care about these characters. Now look, this is a series that is like nonstop action. He has found a way to basically make this nonstop action. It really is. But he has those character moments, so when they slow things down and we have those one-on-one conversations, it just soars. It's fantastic. For someone who is just a character first guy like myself, you'll find plenty to like there. And I think if you also like a little bit of grimdark, this book has all kinds of grimdarky goodness for you. And I think that I haven't found anything quite as grimdarky since the First Law. I really feel like this is the sci-fi equivalent to the First Law. And the thing is, it doesn't start that way. He feels like it almost feels transitory. Like for the generation that grew up reading Harry Potter and grew up reading Hunger Games, this feels like the next natural progression. Like it's like, okay, you guys have grown up. Here you go. Here's this. Try this out. And at first you'll be like, oh, this feels very familiar. This feels like something that I like. And then he just gets darker and darker and darker. And by the sequel trilogy, guys, you're wondering what happened to this guy that he would write something this sinister, this dark, this cruel, and this punishing, because it's just so grimdarky. I love it. And it isn't just about body count, although the body count is high. And like I said earlier, he makes you care about the characters, so when those characters do get taken away from you, and they will get taken away from you, it hurts just a little bit. There are character deaths in this series that are so brutal that I have actually, probably since the first time since I read Song of Ice and Fire the first time, to where I actually like had to put the book down for a minute, because it was just so, it just took so much out of you. And it never feels cheap. It never feels like it's just done for thrills, just done for shocks. It's done that way because you've learned to care about these characters. You're in the trenches with them in battle. You know, you feel what they're feeling. So when those bad things happen, it's going to cut you a little bit. I just think that this is a testament to how great his character work is. Something else I really, really like about this is his cast system that he's made based off of colors. You know, reds being kind of the bottom, golds being at the top. I'll let you get into the nitty gritty of that. If you want a further explanation of it, I do it better in that Why You Should Read video. But the thing is with that is that it really shows how the hierarchy works, and it makes it easy to understand. And I really, really dig the way that they do it. And so much is revealed along the way. Like I said, I'd be getting into spoiler territory if I really get into what each individual color means exactly, and I don't want to do that because I want you guys to read the series. But I really do appreciate the way he does the cast system in here. It's very, very well done, and it's really as simple as, you know, following these colors here. It really is that simple, but it matters, and I think that it makes it easier for the reader to understand right away. Okay, this is okay. These are blues. That means that they can do this. This is brown. That means this. You know, I think that helps you establish what their role in society is, or the society is. But I think the slow evolution of the series, where I said I think it feels like transitory, is it starts off. I'm not going to lie, guys. The first book feels very familiar, something that YA audiences might have read before. But you're like, but it's a little more violent, I think, than we're used to. And then it just gets darker, like I said. I think with the first book, it's just this kind of this opinion, which I'll get into when I get into the bad guys, because it's going to happen. And then you get the second book, and it's like night and day difference. And then it just, like I said, it just gets more and more brutal. And that's not the only thing that makes it good, is it's more brutal. It's like, it feels like he realizes that his audience has grown up at the same time. And he's like, okay, I'm going to hold your hand while you make this transition from young adult to, you know, sci-fi fantasy, and really adult sci-fi fantasy. And it's handled well. The way that he does it, he really eases you in. And I know that there are people who've said, like, they never read Grimdark or had an interest in Grimdark until they read this series, because of the way he eased you into it. And I think that's something you don't see a lot. You know, things like now are just, hey, let's make things as brutal and dark as we can be from page one. And I think that this is, definitely the series. If you've been interested in Grimdark, but you're not ready to jump right into First Law or Broken Empire or something like that, I think this could be a good place for you to start, for sure. Another good thing, guys, is space. Look, guys, I'm a NASA dork. I love space. I've always been enamored with it. Space is sexy, guys. I think it is. And the fact that this isn't an interstellar story. We're very much still in our own solar system, but it's 700 years from now. So the solar system's quite different from what you and I know. But I think that helps keep it the way that it is. And it has established, okay, there's terraforming and things like that with some of these other planets. You think thinking, okay, them outer planets, you know, what use are they going to be? No, he goes into all this. And it's in a way that's it's very, very much fantastical. It's one of those things where you kind of be like, if you're looking at this, guys, read The Expanse if you want, like, scientifically accurate, okay? This is very much Star Wars. I think this is very Star Wars in the way that, like, okay, there's going to be action stuff that you're going to be like, well, the math of that doesn't really check out. Yeah, that's going to happen. But you know what? It's way more fun that way. I think it really is. So, like I said, I've got The Expanse if I want the hard science, and I got this if I just want the space opera Star Wars goodness. I think it's got all that kind of stuff. But the weapons in these are so cool, guys. The weapons, and I don't want to ruin what a razor is for you, but it's one of the coolest weapons I've ever seen. I think after you read this series, you're going to want to go buy a scythe and like hang it on your wall, because it makes the scythe really, really just an awesome, awesome addition to this universe, and you'll understand what I mean. But yeah, the razor, I can't get over how cool of an idea that was. And I don't know if it's the first sci-fi book to ever use something like that, but it's the first that I'd read like that. The idea of, again, read it. I don't want to ruin for you what that weapon is, because it's just such a cool discovery. But I think this just has everything you want with sci-fi. It's got your space battles. It's got your interplanetary war. It's got political intrigue. It's got your backstabbing. And the politics in here are really good, guys. And honestly, I think that they're way better than the book like this needed. I think it's very much on like the same level as like a Hyperion, where it had those politics in book 2 that I was kind of like, I mean, it wasn't quite where I wanted to be, but they were very good. It's kind of on that same level as Dan Simmons here, and that's impressive for a series like this. You wouldn't expect the politics to be as good as they are, but they really are. Just they keep you guessing quite a bit. I like the twists in this, guys. There are twists in here that are so insane that there's no way. I don't care what anybody says that they saw them coming. I don't care what you say. I admit that I am very much an along for the ride kind of reader. I don't try to figure these things out as I go. But yeah, there's something I could have never figured out, and some of these books just have some of the biggest punch you in the heart endings that will just crush you. And it's not just character deaths, guys. There are just big plot twists that really will just make your jaw hit the floor. It's so good. You'll never see them coming. That's what I say. But again, the way the series just continues to evolve, I love that. It grows with the characters, because yes, we do start when they're teenagers, and it gets further in the future than that. I'll leave it there. I don't want to feel like I'm spoiling anything for you guys, but it does. They're not. We're not in book 5 now, and it's a year later. Some time goes by, so it grows with its characters. I feel like the content does get more serious, more dire, more dark as the characters get older, because I think you have that sense of eternal optimism, when you're a teenager, and you become more jaded over time, especially during a time of war, right? So these are things that I think he really took into account, and I think it's really cool how it starts as like a revolutionary tale, and then becomes like a cautionary tale of what the costs are of revolution. It deals with what happens after the revolution. And I think that's really something that a lot of things, what happens after Happily Ever After? This series does address that. What happens after Happily Ever After? Oh, well, you see, it isn't quite as happy as we expected it to be, right? But look, Brown, he writes war and chaos so well. I've read a ton of sci-fi series, not as much as fantasy, obviously, but I've never felt like the action is done this way, because he'll do his spaceship stuff like that, but he does a lot of stuff ground war. And I think what's really unique about the way that he writes is, I would be reading some of them, and I would text my buddy who got me into this, and I'd be like, I'm not sure I really understand what's going on. He's like, yeah, I think he does that on purpose. He wants to show you the sense of confusion when you're in the middle of a battlefield and you don't know what's going on. You don't know if the guy next to you is good or bad. He draws that chaos out of those pages so good, to where you're like, I'm kind of confused. I need to read that again. And you're like, okay, I think he's doing this on purpose. So some people might find that as a fault. I find it very good, because you got to think, guys, you're in the middle of a ground war. There's stuff exploding everywhere. There's lasers. There's people getting stabbed. You don't know if the guy you just ran into is someone you want to stab or someone on your side. It's so visceral. I love it. I think all that John Gwynne has done is good. It just kind of capturing just the absolute chaos and confusion of a field battle. And I think that you wouldn't expect that in a book like this, but man, it's really, really well done. But I like that Brown wears his influences on his sleeve. He's got his Ender's Game in here. He's got Dune. That's a big one here. He's got Star Wars in here, but he's also got a lot of history of like Greek and Roman mythology. Some stuff in here that's very, very awesome. So I mean, everything up to including like the Odyssey. So he mixes so much stuff with real history, fictional history, mythology, and of course some sci-fi legends that you can tell that he is a fan of. And it just makes a perfect mix, guys. It really, really does. But not everything is perfect, right? So let's go ahead and talk about the bad, or as I like to call it, the not so good. Because look, I adore this series, warts and all, but I'm not blind to some of the things that are going to bother some people. So this is going to be subjective. Obviously, I don't necessarily have a problem with this stuff, but you guys might. So these are the people, I think if you're a fence sitter, these are some things that you're going to kind of want to know about. First off, it's an old video, but you can go back and watch it. The first book, I thought it was just okay. I wasn't that wild about it. I almost decided not to continue with the series. I'm glad that I did, because it's one of my favorite ongoing series now. But that first book, It's just okay. So I think if you read that first book and you really like it, buckle up. You're going to love this series. If you read the first book and you're like, I don't know what bill of goods Mike is selling me here, it isn't working for me, trust me, try to commit to doing 2 books. So guys, these aren't hard to read. You can read them pretty quick. They do get thicker as they go along, but that first trilogy, you really can read it pretty quick. It's a real page turn. Like I said, it's mostly action, so you're able to get through it really, really quick. So try to commit to doing those first 2 books. But yeah, first book, there's a lot of problems. Namely, it's that it's Hunger Games on Mars. It really is Hunger Games on Mars. And I went into it, and this is my own fault, I went into it expecting and wanting Ender's Game. That's what it was kind of sold to me as, was Ender's Game. And what I got out of it was, this is, Hunger Games on Mars. So I was very, very disappointed with that. And I was like, do I really want another series like this? And look, at the book signing that I met Pierce Brown at, I asked him about this. Did the publisher force you to make it more like him? And he said no. But I just feel like the publisher was like, Hunger Games is over, and your series kind of reminds me, could you make it more like Hunger Games, and then we'll publish you? That's what it feels like. And that's the only reason that I can explain the way book 1 to book 2 is just such a monumental shift in the way that it is told. It just feels like a completely different series after book number 1. But yeah, you will get some of those things. Another thing is, the first book, Darrow feels kind of Mary Sue, Gary Stu. He feels very perfect. He's always the smartest person in the room, no matter what. And I found that to be a real problem when you're doing the first person perspective, because we're in this character's head all the time. Why did we not know that this was his plan? That was something that I struggled with a lot. And that's why I will say books 4 and 5 get away from just having a singular POV. It gets into multi-POV, which I actually like a lot more. So it's something that if you are on the fence about first-person perspective in books like this, I don't know if this is necessarily going to be the one that changes your mind on them. Another thing is, look, guys, if you aren't into grimdark, this series does slowly slide into grimdark, because I know there are some people who love the original trilogy, but they can't do the sequels because they just get too brutal and too dark. Look, they're very depressing books. They are. Dark Age is more than just a clever name. That is one of the darkest books I've ever read, right? I actually questioned myself at one time if Pierce Brown had hired Joe Abercrombie to ghostwrite it for him, because it was, again, like I said, the first time I felt like I was kind of crawling around that muck like you do when you read a first law book. And it's not for everybody. And I know there's a lot of people, like I said, they went into this saying like, okay, this is like the next step up from like a Hunger Games. And then they got it and they just got so dark, they didn't know how to handle it. Me, being a grimdark guy, I loved it. I was like, keep it coming, get it more dark, more brutal. You can get darker with this, but he doesn't make any apologies for it. He will not, he won't turn the camera away when the bad things are happening. And look, another thing is his writing style is not going to work for prose enthusiasts. If you're one of those who think that Name of the Wind is the greatest book ever because you just think that the writing is beautiful, but even the story was just okay for you, it might not be for you. He uses a lot of short sentences. He's very to the point. He doesn't spend a lot of time describing landscapes and the stars and things like that. He has some beautiful lines. Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's a bad writer at all. I'm saying if you are a prose snob, you may not like his writing style. Like I said, I don't pay attention to stuff like that too much. I'm pretty easy sell when it comes to prose, but even I notice sometimes some things are kind of jarring. Now, I'm not talking about during those chaos scenes, because those are just roll with it, because that's just the way that he's doing that on purpose, I believe. But there are a lot of times where I'm like, that was a really short sentence, So, but again, that might bother you, might not. The dark themes and atrocities of war, guys, they aren't covered up. If you think that there's no place, like I've heard a lot of complaints on my Malazan journey about this, if you think there's no place for that, this one might be a pass for you, because he does handle stuff about the atrocities of war very, very violently, and he will show it to you. He will zoom in really close and show you what's going on. And no one's safe, guys. There is no plot armor in this. And this is why when this series gets labeled as YA by people, I think, are you crazy? You got to be crazy, because there is no such thing as plot armor in this universe. Anyone can die at any time. Women, children, men, pets, you name it, anyone can die in this series. And he doesn't care if you get mad about it. I believe that he's like a Joe, where he gets his power from our tears, because there's some stuff, like I said, that will make you question, who hurt this guy with some of the decisions that he makes. So again, if you want him to fade to black when the things are going to happen, leave it up to your imagination. He's not going to do that. He's going to show you, and it only gets more brutal along the way. But so this series can be just kind of depressing for some people. And the biggest thing, guys, I think, is I got to say, is it's incomplete. I don't think it's going to be a problem. Look, he put out, 5 books in 5 years. And, The Virus Shall Not Be Named obviously slowed down, the most recent one. But he did share on his Instagram about 6-7 months ago, I think, that, the book was complete and he threw about 200 pages of manuscript in the trash because he wasn't satisfied with it. Me, I'm like, look, take your time, do it right. If this is going to be the last time we spend in this universe, take your time and do it right. But, for some people, they're like my wife. She read the original trilogy. She's waiting for book 6 to come out before she reads the sequel trilogy. If you want to do that, you can. Do you know why? Because the original trilogy has a very clear, open, and shut case where if you wanted to leave it there, you can't. You can. If you want more, hey, the sequel trilogy is there for you. So that's going to be like a decision to you. I don't think this is a Song of Ice and Fire situation here, guys, where you're going to be like, oh, is he ever going to be done? He's been pretty fast in the past. I think he just, he has some things that he struggled with. And I think that, again, we're going to be 3 years in June since Dark Age came out. I would expect to hear some kind of update from him pretty soon. Now, some final thoughts, guys. Like I said, I feel like this series has been misrepresented as YA. And I think that anytime you have teenage protagonists, people think their series has got to be YA. And look, like I said, starting with book 2, Night and Day Difference, I could see definitely reading book 1 being like, it's a little more violence than I think most YA books have. We got characters getting stabbed in the eyeballs and stuff. But it pretty much is what I've said before, is it's an adult series with young protagonists. And again, they don't stay that young over the series. They grow over time. It's kind of that transition into adulthood that, I love so much. So, like I said, by book 5, guys, this is on par with The First Law, one of the most adult series that I have read. So, I don't think that you have any worries there. But, yeah, the big misconception out there is if you got teenage protagonists, it's got to be YA. And I think that's just really lazy. Now, look, I was guilty of that too. I saw the covers for for Red Rising, and I thought, it's pretty good, but I'm not really into YA right now. On Twitter, he actually responded to me, my books aren't YA, my man. And that was actually what got me interested, because, I love an author that actually interacts with people. But look, I don't think it's a series that's going to be for everyone. It's definitely not. I've had some people be like, I tried reading the first book, and it just wasn't clicking for me. Hey, it's going to happen. I like I said, I implore you to try to give it 2 books. But if you just, read what works for you, guys. If it isn't working for you, it isn't working for you. But so I don't think it's a series going to work for everyone, but I think it's going to work more than not for most people. I think most people are going to enjoy it. I don't usually do a why you should read this channel unless it's a series I feel like it's going to be a high success rate of pleasing the reader. And I know a lot of people that said that they never would have given the series a shot if not for me, and I hope I can keep that record going. So I can't wait for book 6, guys. I can't wait for Pierce Brown to accept my invitations to come on this channel. I know that he has said that he doesn't really social media very much. He actually doesn't do guest appearances and stuff while he is writing, and I admire that. I admire a guy who is focused on what he is doing. But I don't think, like I said, I met him and talked to him at that book signing. Very, very awesome guy. So I don't think that he would have any problems coming on the channel eventually. But that one is one of my author interview bucket list items. So I do hope to talk to him in the future, and I do hope to read the conclusion to the series pretty soon. So guys, that is it, the good and the bad of Red Rising. I think it's a series you're gonna like if you just buckle down and give it a try, as it is one of my favorite going right now, and I cannot wait to see the end. So drop in the comments, guys. Let me know if you read Red Rising. Do you want to read Red Rising? Are you going to read it now? Did you decide some of the bad things you listed or stuff that's just got me being like, I just don't want to do it now? Drop in the comments, guys, and let me know, and I will talk to you there.